The prize purse for the international has reached incredible heights thanks to crowdfunding through the compendium over the years. The international began as a tournament similar to the majors in CSGO, where Valve put up the money, and yeah, it was $1 million starting out, and then teams competed for that. But by adding in this crowdfunding component via the compendium, they allowed the community to, by the way, not only fund Valve, because 75% of that money goes to Valve, but also pump up the prize pool for the World Championship of Dota, the international. So as TI7 has hit 24 million total prize pool for the one event, first place is $10 million. Since CSGO is made by the same company, Valve, technically it was made by a third party, but it's the same company owns it and runs it and develops it and maintains it. There's an obvious contrast to be had between CSGO's top circuit of majors and the international, because in CSGO, yes, last year we had the bump up in prize purse, but CSGO majors, our world championships, which there are 2 of per year currently, $1 million is the total prize purse of a CSGO major. First place, 500k. So we're talking about 20 times more for first place in a tournament like the international over a CSGO major, 20 times total prize pool in the international over a CSGO major. So the obvious question is, why doesn't CSGO have crowdfunding? Should CSGO have crowdfunding? But whenever you bring up these points, I've noticed there are a lot of people from CSGO who try to put on their industry hat and speculate and analyze the reasons why. And there are many common crowdfunding objections that I've heard over the years, not just from CSGO people. I used to hear this from League of Legends people in the past, where their world championship used to be like $1 million for first place. Even we're talking about in the past years where, again, Dota was like 8 million for first place, 7 million for first place. And the same objections came up again and again. So we're going to address some of them here. So in CSGO, one of the number one objections is, but CSGO has sticker money. So here's the comment that we're going to take to represent that. This comment had 1,483 points on Reddit. It said the difference is where the crowdfunding goes. CS major teams all get paid out sticker money. It's less exciting, but it's probably much better for teams like Flipside. When he refers to Flipside, he's talking about a team that they will touch and go to even make the major. And when they make the major, it's pretty much certain that they're going to go out in the first phase and probably in last place and not do very well, as they indeed did. Now, first of all, the idea that CSGO has sticker money as well. Obviously, there aren't stickers in the same way in Dota. And so, yes, we know stickers make a lot of money for the CS pros, and that's big as well as the prize purse. But part of the problem with that is, first and foremost, before we get into any elements of stickers versus compendium, that's an irrelevant point, because actually, if anything, you've made the case there that CSGO could, in a way, be better than Dota, because it could have both. It could have a compendium for people who want to fund the prize pool, and it could have stickers for people who want to make sure that the players themselves just all get more, that even the last place team at a tournament gets prize money and gets extra additional income, and as a result, it's successful for everyone. So there's no reason to have one or the other. Why would you not be allowed to both? In fact, by offering options, there's a person who would just fund the prize purse who's not that interested in buying stickers, or someone who doesn't care about the compendium who would buy the stickers. You're actually going to increase the amount of total crowdfunding money coming in. So actually, that's an argument, if anything, in favor of doing both. Now, the notion that, that's just a different way of putting the crowdfunding. Now, the implication there, even though it's not explicit in his comment, but this is a general implication that people have, is because people don't know the exact numbers of how much crowdfunding makes via stickers and via compendium, even though actually we know for the compendium, because we can see for the compendium that if it was $24 million were raised for the international, I mean, that's not entirely the prize purse because Valve puts up a couple of million themselves, then that means something like, 60, let's say it was 20 million was raised by the compendium, then it's something like 80 million total was raised. Now, I can go ahead and tell you right now, $80 million for stickers for one major. Are you fucking having a laugh? No, don't be ridiculous. So first of all, it's not just different. There's much, much less of the stickers than there is of the crowdfunding via compendium. Let's just get that right out in the open. So in that sense, you've absolutely been blown out of the water. Stickers not as good in any way as compendium. So if we had to have stickers versus compendium all the way. That's absolutely the whole way. Now, yes, they're different games, so you can't compare the numbers entirely like that. There's reasons as to why Dota might get more from crowdfunding than they would just in a world where they only had stickers. But then you've also got to consider, it's not just like it's different where the crowdfunding goes. Yes, that's actually not just a small detail, though. That's a massive detail. Because the reason I like the compendium funding the international is because when everyone pays all that money, they're sort of paying it, first of all, for what they get from the compendium. That has its own benefits and what people want to have those. But secondly, they're paying it to fund the tournament. And then who decides who gets what cut of the money from the compendium for the prize pool? The game does. So if you are fantastic, you might be a team that people aren't really even a fan of, and you go to the final, you win it, you get the lion's share of that money because you win the top heavy tournament. I mean, it's not that top heavy actually. The breakdown's pretty good. It's just you got a lot of money at the top compared to other games. So it promotes greatness. It rewards, it celebrates excellence. That's something that we don't do with the stickers. We just actually say, okay, these guys, look, the popularity of players and teams mean that stickers have been bought. We're sharing the money out. Okay, great. I want the person who comes first place to make the most money. I want the guy who comes top 4. Like, for example, at this last CSGO Major, yeah, everyone knows, not a big fan of Immortals. I think they're an all right team, but they were kind of a fluke to make second place. Now, yes, while I think it's a fluke, and while I think the format problems allowed them to get second place, they deserve to get a massive payday for coming second place in the World Championship. They deserve to have millions potentially for that. But instead, they don't do. They get the second place for what we have at CSGO Majors at the moment, which isn't that much. Obviously, isn't even vaguely close to $1 million because first place is 500k. So not really a good argument yet established as to why we wouldn't have crowdfunding via compendium. So another one, and this is a classic one because it's one that League of Legends fans used to use for years and years, which was that in time, the summary, in time, yeah, you might get a rise like every year, like Dota 2 currently does. You might get a rise in the amount of money raised, but eventually one day the number will start to go down. And then the implication is always that will hurt the game. And people make the jump from the number will go down to that will hurt the game as though you didn't even need to establish the reasons why there. It's just obvious. So here's an example of that. The guy says, I personally view crowdfunding, particularly for prize pools, to be a short-sighted attempt at gaining market share and media attention. Now, first and foremost there, yeah, you're going to have to establish that massively. The idea that the whole reason for crowdfunding for prize pools is to gain market share. By the way, he means in terms of games. So in his world, by getting a lot of crowdfunding in for Dota 2, that raises Dota 2's market share, as in how many people play Dota 2. So the people who currently play Dota 2, funding a tournament in esports in Dota 2, which isn't even all of Dota 2, it's just a tournament in the esports niche of Dota 2, makes Dota 2's amount of total players increase. Obvious question, how? No answer given there. And also gives you media attention. Yes, it gives you media attention, but that part in itself is already problematic because when he says it gives you media attention, you get the media attention for the big number and you get the media attention for the concept of crowdfunding, right? The media attention isn't tied to the number being incredibly high. Like, media attention was massive when they first started crowdfunding and it was just a few million that were coming in and then eventually 10 million, then 15 million. But if you raise 10 million for your world championship, how will you get less media attention than a CSGO major where it's 1 million come hella high water no matter what? There's no media attention for that. There's no articles like, wow, Valve's going to put $1 million in the prize pool. Well, no, wait a second, that's what they do every time. That's not a new story. So actually crowdfunding will always inherently get more media attention in this particular sense. Let's continue what he says. The bigger the prize pool due to the crowdfunding, the more people are financially invested. Don't really know about that, but okay. Simple. This allows sponsors to have more confidence in putting up huge sums of money. Stop right there. Right? What does that mean that it allows sponsors? Because I don't know if this guy knows this, but the TI is not really a tournament being run around sponsors. Like actually, like I said, the crowd is funding most of the prize pool. So the crowd saying essentially we're willing to put in, I mean, like I told you, like 80 million and 20 odd million goes in the prize pool, doesn't then mean that then we get some sponsors in and then they bring in, like 100 million and now the tournament's worth 120 million. No, that's not how it works. Like there's actually no relevance whatsoever to the sponsors directly being involved in Dota and then just TI raising the money through the compendium. Remember, like a lot of fans, here's something that CSGO and League of Legends fans never understand. They all think, Dota is just only the international. And then the other tournaments, like no one really cares about those. There's just sort of a build up to the international. No, the international is the most important. There are other tournaments like majors that are only a step below the international though. And that definitely matter and that have full circuits of people, teams from around the world traveling, people competing, fighting to the death to qualify for these things. amazing matches that go all the way to the limit of what you can do in Dota, and certainly don't show that anyone's holding anything back in these games. Absolutely not. So the notion that like that circuit couldn't survive and be sponsored with all the same sponsorship, well, it is. That has no bearing on what happens at the international. So let's continue. E-League had 6 sponsors, each paying $2 million for the various perks that sponsorship entailed over each of the seasons, for an example, right? That's a key thing there. He's giving an example there, because I'd have to go ahead and say, I don't think they did have these 6 sponsors, each paying $2 million. But okay, this is an example. In order for sponsorship marketing to be effective, the brand needs to set aside triple the sponsorship cost to support the sponsorship across their own channels, internal and external. Let's just assume he's correct there. So the total cost is about $8 million for a brand such as HyperX to effectively sponsor E-League. That's a lot of headsets. Don't yet know really what his point is, but let's keep going. This is all well and good, but crowdfunding can't grow forever. Well, stop there. Nothing can grow forever. Growth can never be exponential and permanent. Right. Now that we're all aware of that, let's not exist in a fantasy world where anything could have been. So we all kind of, I think it's pretty redundant to say that growth can't be forever. Surely we all know that, right? We all know no business can just go on forever, keep growing forever, profits going up forever. I mean, aren't we all aware of that? So is the concept of business and capitalism just not worth pursuing anymore? Let's continue. When the day comes that the prize pool isn't larger than the year before, this is the key point that they always make, do sponsors get nervous? Sure, I would. Less crowdfunding would probably indicate less viewers. Less viewers means less ROI, given the costs are the same. If sponsors start to pull out, Valve would have to do something drastic to get them back, or find an alternative to virtually print money like they're currently doing. You have to consider that in business ideology. If you're not growing, you're losing. Right. So first and foremost, the premise that he sets up here of how businesses work in the real world. Like the worst part of this isn't even esports industry stuff. This is how businesses in the real world work, right? If you're going to talk on that and be an expert, like I don't pretend to be an expert, probably should have some sort of like background in economics or the financial industry, maybe even ideally some actual work within a marketing department of a company that would mean you'd know what these figures are like and the philosophy, crucially, which is what you're outlining, and how their mind will work with their internal logic, not necessarily how we would think about it or someone like me in the industry. Now, with that said, first of all, you will make significantly more prize money, and by his own logic, that if you see a lot of money and money invested by fans, for crowdfunding shows that a lot of fans are watching, which makes sponsors jump on board. He's actually making a good case for crowdfunding at that point in time, up until his period when it drops off. Now, at this point in time, through those years, you will make significantly, massively, drastically more money through crowdfunding over those years that the game is really active with crowdfunding and growing than you will with having a format like we currently have in League of Legends in the past, where they used to just put up the $2 million and $1 million was for first place for Worlds. And in CSGO, where it was either $500K or now it's $1 million and first place is $500K, you will make significantly more. Because remember, Dota's making like 20 million, 18 million, 20... Well, think about, let's just do the maths. That means 2 or 3 years of that level of crowdfunding, you end up with something like 60 million went in the pool over 3 or 4 years. As opposed to how many in CSGO? We've got 2 majors per year, $1 million each. That's 2 million per year for 3 or 4 years. That's 6 to 8 million versus like 80 million. Did that make sense? Did I say 80 million? Or was it 60 million? I can't remember what I said for the figure. But you can see it's 10 times or more. So first of all, even if we then drop off and get less, it's already worth it because we got in 10 times more money than we would have done otherwise in the model where we didn't. So I don't know how, using his own logic of how sponsors think, etc., how is it good for the period up until it drops off that you don't have the crowdfunding, which by his logic, his dynamic, would make the sponsorship increase? Don't really understand the logic of that. Then you've got to consider, like, because I said the overall amount you'll get in is so much more, even when it starts to go down, it won't matter that much. First of all, when it goes down, it's not just going to jump from 20 million to 5. So you're already still going to be getting way more than you would have per major, per world championship from just the current method we have in CSGO when you have the compendium method in Dota 2. Secondly, the notion that when a tournament drops from 20 million to 15 million, that suddenly sponsors, the same sponsors are going to be like, I'm not as interested now. Because that's not how they think, is it? They don't think just based on what happened in the past. What they'll do is they'll look at this tournament. Remember, they're not sponsoring something where it's like you're a monthly payment you have to keep up. They're sponsoring for that tournament. So what they'll do is they'll look at that tournament, International 10, let's say, that has the 15 million, and they'll say, $15 million tournament? Yeah, I do want to sponsor that. I'll sponsor it for this much. And maybe that might be less. I don't really know about that personally. I don't think it necessarily works that way. I think they sponsor based on the value of what it's worth. And I actually think whether it's 10 million or 20 million, the same sponsorship would come in. But that's just my opinion. I think that they'll say, right, 15 million tournament, I'll offer this. They won't go, it was 20 before, well, it'll surely be 10 next and 5 after that. Therefore, somehow that makes this $15 million tournament not worth sponsoring to me. Square brackets, because in this guy's world, this is what would have to be the continual thought. If only this had been a $1 million tournament and I'd had never known that the prize money had gone down by crowd interest being less, and then I would have sponsored it for more than I'm now about to sponsor this 15 million tournament, or at all I would sponsor it. Kind of a ridiculous premise when you think about it that way, right? People will still make business decisions based on each year. Like when he said that line of like, what was it? Let me see. The business ideology line. Yes, he said you have to consider that in business ideology, if you're not growing, you're losing, right? First of all, business ideology. There's no one business ideology, mate. Business is essentially a game, and people apply different metagame strategies to succeed at business. There's no one philosophy that everyone's following. That's kind of ridiculous. But there is a type of business ideology, you are right. That is, if you're not growing, then you're losing out, basically. Now, first and foremost, from the little I know about economics and financials, the reason why that exists is because of the public company shareholder model, where the public company is beholden to its shareholders to give them a profit quarter after quarter. And therefore, when they have a losing quarter, they don't get to look at the past or the future. They have to be judged on that quarter. And the shareholders see, well, we're losing money and we're not going to get as much from our dividend. And therefore, the shareholders mad. So they demand continual growth, which, by the way, itself is not a sustainable model, as we've seen from the financial markets around the world. But that's when you have a public company with shares and shareholders. That has nothing to do with the international. People who pay in money to the compendium are not buying shares in the company, and therefore sponsors who sponsor the tournaments are not getting shares in the company in some sort of dividend from that directly. I mean, they are in terms of they make money back from what they hope to be to marketing, and they're definitely not getting anything down the line, any kind of equity. So it's irrelevant that it goes down. That doesn't change the fact that for HyperX, in your example, it is absolutely worth it to sponsor a tournament that has 15 million pumped in by the fans, and way more worth it to sponsor that $50 million tournament than one with $1 million total. And most of it that came from the fans went to sticker money, which no one knows the amounts of. So by your logic, we don't know how many viewers there are. You know, it's a very muddled kind of argument against crowdfunding. That's what's bizarre about it. The parts that make sense actually seem to bolster crowdfunding and point out why it would be an overwhelming positive. And there aren't really any cons in there. It's just sort of like, yeah, but if a number goes down, someone might get scared and they might not put more money in. Like, I don't think that's really been established very well. And yet that's a famous one that League of Legends people used to say. I mean, just to hop back to League of Legends, the reason why I bring that up is because League of Legends, like I say, used to get like roughly $2 million a year from Riot Games as the prize pool. First place would be $1 million, so it was incredibly top heavy. And then they had that right up until last year. It was still around that level. So remember, there was only really a proper Worlds from season 2 onwards. So from season 2 to season 7, you could win $1 million for first place in those tournaments. So we're talking about $6 million, right? $6 million over 6 years. In Dota 2, I think they only began crowdfunding. I believe it was for TI4. So they've only had 3 years of doing that. And off the top of my head, they're well over like 50, 60 million already in that. So we're talking about let's say 2 million for each of the League of Legends ones. So 12 million versus 60 million or more. And by the way, every year, because they only started and they only had 3 years in that one. So 3 years to get way more, to get like 10 million more, 10 times more or much more. Now, yes, you can't directly compare those numbers in as much as Dota 2, League of Legends, CSGO have different player bases and different people who are willing to contribute. But by the way, League of Legends has a bigger player base. League of Legends has bigger numbers of viewers. So actually, League of Legends could probably crowdfund even better than CSGO and Dota 2 if they did it this particular manner, but they don't. So anyway, another one that we get to, and this is a reason why there's a distinction in Dota 2 in terms of who watches it compared to CSGO, is that Dota 2 has more players, particularly due to China, and more viewers. So this one, 191 points, says, dumb comparison. CS doesn't reach the massive Eastern market that Dota does, right? Yes, it does. You're right. Like, for example, you go look at the last major for Dota 2, and okay, so in CS, we're lucky for a major to get over 1 million viewers. Like, say like 1.5 million is like a good major. They get like 3 million or more viewers for a major just from China alone. There's a massive player base and amount of people watching the game in China, right? First of all, yes. What does that have to do with crowdfunding, though? Like, why would the fact that there are millions of essentially missing Chinese people in CSGO affect that the people who do exist in CSGO could crowdfund this tournament, and that would be better than no crowdfunding? You haven't addressed that at all. Yes, it won't be as much, but why would that be a problem? Secondly, we don't know dollar for dollar, like man for man, how much someone in each region paid to the Dota 2 prize purse. So even though there's more viewers in China, does a Chinese person who contributes to the compendium, are they worth more money than the person who contributes from the West? I mean, they all pay the same amount in theory to the compendium. I don't know about that. In fact, I don't know. I don't think they ever released the stats on which region buys the most compendiums or what percentage of the total compendiums. I don't think they actually released those stats. Secondly, I don't think it matters. And by the way, in terms of marketing as Western esports knows it, from companies like HyperX, big companies, they care about Western users. And so actually the Western user is worth dollar for dollar, especially like Americans, people from the UK, Germany. They're worth a lot more man for man than someone in China, because the spending power of the guy in China, the random lowest level person, average lowest common denominator guy, isn't as high as the person in the West. So you'd still get a massive amount from the West. Maybe not as much as Dota, yes, admittedly, but a lot more than we're currently getting. And on top of that, those viewers that you do get in the West are actually worth more to sponsors, etc., and the overall ecosystem of the esport. Secondly, what's that got to do with the international anyway? Like, remember the notion that CS doesn't have this big Eastern market. Yeah, so what? It's not Valve who puts the money up anyway. It's not like they're supposed to go, right, we've got millions of people in China, better put more money in this prize pool. They're not putting more money in the prize pool. The fans are. That's not really even an objection, is it? I mean, it's an objection. It's just shit, well, no. It's basically saying China has a lot of people. But what does that have to do with the conversation about CSGO people funding? Yeah, but China, lots of people. None of them in CSGO. Yeah, but I'm talking about what if the CSGO fans were to put money in. China and Dota 2, a lot of Chinese people like Dota. Like, again, like, come on, mate. So, Dota 2 needs large prize pools to compete with the other MOBAs like League of Legends. So here we go, 35 points. I'm afraid the real reason here is competition. Dota 2 has LOL to compete with, and League is obviously the more popular game out of those two. Right, pause. It is, by the way. I mean, supposedly the number of active accounts in League is 100 million. Dota, there's no way. I think they maybe have something like, I think the player base is like 35 million or something a month. So I would guess like 50 million active accounts by the fuckery and how they fudged the numbers for that. So half as many. Let's go back. Hence, Valve uses the prize pools as a sort of marketing tool, i.e., look how shitty your esports are. Come watch Dota. CS, on the other hand, is the only major PC FPS esport. So Valve does not need to be so focused on it as long as they control the market. Right, first of all, that's actually not really the way that modern companies think. They think in terms of profit and then how they're doing in terms of their game. Like, are you aware that League of Legends and Dota 2 take place on a PC? Therefore, actually, no matter how you might in your brain put them into categories, if this is a MOBA, this is FPS, no. CS competes against Dota 2 and League of Legends. That's just a fact. Like, they're not separate. They're both on the same machine, same platform, and the same person can choose to play any of them. So actually they compete against each other. So that immediately, I've shot the whole argument down there. It's not like you only compare LOL and Dota 2, and if someone doesn't play League, they're going to have to play Dota 2. No, that's not the way it's working at all, actually. So that's a very naive way of looking at the market. But this aspect he has of like, since Dota 2 has to compete against it, right? Let me ask you this. Show me the mechanism as to how that would work. Explain to me how having the bigger prize pool and showing that their League of Legends is a shitty esport will get more people in Dota 2, right? people who are fans often think that the amount of prize money a tournament has is going to generate the level of interest it has. Like, for example, people will say in CSGO, yeah, well, maybe we would have a lot more people in Korea play if we had a big tournament there with millions of dollars. No, that would have no effect on people playing in Korea, because people playing in Korea is based on, is it in the PC Bang, the cafe where they go to? Is it promoted well within Korea in that PC Bang? Do people get to play it? And then because other people in the PC Bang play it, see that and go, hey, I'm going to play that game. And does it have servers? And is it supported in terms of the domestic circuit? Those are the factors that will decide how big it is in Korea. Nothing to do with if you did a major and held it in Korea. That wouldn't make the game get loads and loads of people playing it. That wouldn't make people in Korea switch from Overwatch and League of Legends to it. No, that would not be a primary factor. And likewise, as we're talking about crowdfunding mounts, having 10 million for that tournament in Korea or 1 million for that tournament in Korea, it would almost have a negligible, like, or non-existent effect on how many people then played the game. But here's the thing. Try and imagine the average person making this decision based on these macro numbers that we're hearing. Nobody plays a game for fun, because that's who the casual viewer is, and then watches a game based on how much prize money there is. Like, nobody's watching the international going, well, if it's got 24 million, I might watch it then. But if it'd only been 2 million, I wouldn't have bothered watching it. I'm not interested in Dota. That's just not the way it's going. Even worse for playing the game. Nobody's going, what MOBA should we play? Did you know that Dota 2 has 24 million for its prize pool, while League only has a couple of million? Oh, Dota 2 it is then. That doesn't exist. There's no one doing that, especially because, as I pointed out before, a lot of the people from Dota 2 have come from China. No one in China's thinking that way. In fact, they're going into a PC cafe, they're seeing games there, and then they're playing as a result of that. By the way, actually, a lot of them not playing Dota 2, by the way. There's actually games in China which are killing Dota 2. CS Online, killing Dota 2 in terms of revenue made, player base. It's insane. So then you've got to ask yourself, because obviously that person doesn't exist, the guy who only plays the game because he's heard that there's loads of money in that way. Secondly, when he says, like, it's a marketing tool, it's like a way of saying, look at how shitty your esports are, right? Well, by that logic, if this mechanism worked, Dota 2 should have more fans and players than League of Legends. It objectively doesn't and never has during the periods that both games have been around. And yet they've got way better marketing in this particular sense. Yeah, because that's not how people decide to play the game. Finally, the idea that there only is CS, and since you control the market, again, it's not like you're controlling a finite thing and you've got a cartel and you can set the prices. That's a different type of business you're thinking of in terms of the market and all that sort of thing. Not only is CSGO competing against League of Legends, Dota 2, CSGO is competing against every game. Hearthstone, Clash of Clans, Call of Duty, PUBG, Battleground, whatever the PlayerUnknown Battleground shit. They're competing against everything. In fact, they're not even just competing against esports game. They're competing for your time on the computer. So if you go and you play a single player game on Steam, CS is competing against that for your hours to play the game. So again, what people have done in nearly all these crowdfunding objections, you'll notice, is they've taken a very complex ecosystem and massively different factors, some of which are battling each other for supremacy and kind of jostling for which one's the most important one, and different ones that apply at different times. They've taken all that incredibly complicated system, and just like people do when they're a naive person about politics or about financial markets or about immigration, they've boiled it down to one very simple dynamic that they think explains the whole thing, and then an easy yes or no answer. Like, well, since this dynamic goes like this, I say no, it's not worth it. Black and white. Now, that's not the way that almost any problem can be solved when you're talking about this kind of a level and this many variables and factors at play. And so it's just a very naive way of thinking about things. And these aren't very good arguments against the positives that crowdfunding brings. Okay, so there's one more key objection that we want to address here, which is the idea that by having more prize money, people are going to be more professional, they're going to try harder, it's going to make for a better tournament. I mean, by the way, again, that should be an argument in favor of crowdfunding to get the prize money up. But you'll see how these people, with their simplistic thinking, always manage to do the mental gymnastics to make it only a negative. So you're ready. Another downside I see to crowdfunding in Dota 2 is that the other tournaments are utterly dwarfed by the international. Why would players care about these events when placing 5th will still net their team over 1 million? This is dangerous for competition and ultimately hurts the viewing experience if you're not seeing the best performance outside of a single event. I suppose this is a product of the crowdfunding being too successful in a sense where they still need to exceed the previous year. First of all, this person is talking on Dota 2. They're making quite strong value judgments on how Dota 2 fans think and how people would think about the scene, and even qualitative judgments on how well people are playing and how much they're trying, yet they don't seem to actually know anything about the Dota 2 circuit. Because in Dota 2, first of all, little inside piece of info when you're going to talk about the international and crowdfunding. Other tournaments have had compendiums and crowdfunding in Dota. Were you aware of that? Oh, you weren't? Probably shouldn't be talking out your arse then. Don't know what you're talking about, do you? So first of all, other tournaments have had crowdfunding and gotten a lot of money through doing that and doubled and tripled the prize purse. So that doesn't make sense. Secondly, the idea that other tournaments are dwarfed by the international, only in as much as the international is the world championship. Majors are still massive. In fact, majors in Dota 2 in past years used to get like $3 million prize pool. We have $1 million for our world championships. But by your logic, people should care more about a major in Dota 2 than they do about our world championship, our major in CSGO. Not how it works, of course. Then the idea that, like, why would players care about these other events when placing 5th will still net them over $1 million at the international? Because it's not a choice. You can't choose to just be shit at the majors, shit at all the other tournaments. Because first of all, how would you qualify for the international? Again, if you knew anything about the international, you know that qualifying for the international is based on how you did in tournaments in the year. So things like majors and tier 1 events are the primary way to qualify for the international. So if you care about that 5th place at the international, you better do well at those tournaments to get into the international. Secondly, you can't just go, right, well, since 5th place at the international is like $1 million or more, we'll just sit around all year, dick around a bit, wait until the international, and then in his world, right now we'll start trying. That's just not the way sports work, is it? You can't just sit around and not try and not practice and not be that good and then secretly have some untold level that you didn't unleash, like a fucking anime character who didn't go to like Super Saiyan level 6 because that's what this mecha cell needs for you to defeat him. I'll try Super Saiyan level 2 at first. Didn't work, right? Up to 3 we go. Like, what kind of childish cartoon world do these people live in? To be good enough to get 5th at the international, you need to be a very good team, battle-tested throughout the year, playing in those other tournaments, trying your hardest, testing yourself, getting your understanding of the metagame as high as possible, developing the skills of all your teams and players. And then the byproduct of that is you might then be good enough to make a deep run at the international. This is like a child's way of viewing these tournaments that you just, I'm not going to try the other ones because they're not worth the amount of money. Finally, I've watched so many esports where people were getting 10 grand for first place, where the total prize purse of the tournament was 50k. People tried and went life and death for those. There was people who practiced all day long. The Brazilian player Kogu would just have himself locked into a LAN cafe in Sweden overnight, play CSDM for 8 hours to warm up and get to the prime level. The idea that people only try based on how much money, that's a ridiculous way of reverse engineering people's motivations. Secondly, professionalism already lags behind in esports compared to where the prize money's gotten to. Teams don't all have coaches and full teams of analysts and all the stars watch demos and look at the heat maps of the opponents and do proper preparation every time with the bootcamp. They don't do that already. There's teams at the CSGO major most recently who didn't do proper preparation of even what the top-let team would have done 5 years ago. But the millions are already there, and the massive amount of money is already there. This, again, is someone who's never been around a lot of money, who has a normal job, thinking, well, if I could win $1 million, then I'd try for that, and that only. Well, that doesn't make sense, does it? So you can see, these crowdfunding objections are terrible. Like, first of all of his objections there, like more money makes you try harder, like having a massive tournament makes you try harder, right? Well, those all go in favor of crowdfunding up to the point that it stops to drop off, right? Except actually, they even apply to when it drops off, because if it drops down to 15 million total for the tournament, but that's still more than the 1 million from CSGO currently has, you'd still try harder, 15 times harder, right? The logic doesn't make any sense here. So again, you have to get to this fictional world where it's only when the drop-off happens, that the apocalypse happens and everything goes completely to shit. Crowdfunding, in nearly all senses, is a pro. There are very few negatives. The negatives tend to only be relative to the pros of what happens within a world where crowdfunding exists, and those negatives never add up to be worse than just having no crowdfunding and not having any compendium option and not letting CSGO have a chance. It probably wouldn't do as well as Dota. It doesn't have the Chinese people, doesn't have as many people overall viewing it, but it certainly could do better than it is now, which is the original point, and no one has yet made real objections that go against that.
Hey guys, it's Fifth Lauren, also known as 944. Don't forget Thorin's YouTube channel.
What up guys, this is Jordan Nelson Gilbert.
We work with the world's top pros to teach you how to take your game to the next level with constantly updated training content. When you're done watching and want a trainer warm up, just a few clicks will put you in your preferred training mods like Deathmatch. But why warm up for a match on Mirage by getting shot in the back on Dust 2? That's why we built Duels, real fights and real maps. 1 minute in Duels is like 20 rounds of real CS. Exclusively available on Boomeo.com.